Greetings, Guardians, my name is Bife here. So, we've recently been covering the lore from the Spire of the Watcher dungeon. There's been a lot to talk about, from cowboys to clairvoyant AIs to Aramis, but today I wanted to take a quick look at what is probably the most intriguing little bit of lore from the dungeon. Now, granted, it doesn't lead us to Lightfall, and it doesn't bring us any closer to understanding the grand plan of the Witness, but not every piece of lore has to be a huge revelation. This is a bit of lore that is well worth talking about for a bigger sense. It's not topic-focused like the other bits of lore in the dungeon, but in terms of what it means for the world of Destiny generally, it's way bigger. Today, we're going to single out one of Anna's compatriots who represents one of those odd guardians in Destiny's lore that I know my fellow lore junkies are going to ask questions about in the future. His name is Moss II, and he's an exo-warlock with a very peculiar relationship with his ghost. How peculiar? Well, let's take a look. Our first look into Moss as a character comes from Anna Bray, when she takes a seat with him and his fire team in the ether tank in the Elixni Quarter. There, we can start to see some of the strange interactions that Moss has with his ghost. Our lore here comes from the Text Mechanica armor that drops throughout the dungeon. Take a listen, and in particular, listen out for the interactions between Moss and his ghost, as well as what the others say about the two of them. 3 rugged guardians crowd a wooden table in the ether tank. Anna spots their Text Mechanica gear in the crowd. She sends Neek through the mingling bustle of Elixni and human patronage to order refreshments from the barkeep. Anna saddles up to the table, slaps her hand down. "Wasn't sure you'd show up after our talk." No one likes dealing with Vex, Gunslinger. The awoken hunter, Earp, grundles from below the brim of his hat. Anna smiles and tilts her head. "Which is why I'm paying you for the trouble. We accepted before some of us knew we were dealing with robots that delete you from existence." A leather-robed exo-warlock, Moss II, leans forward, followed by a ghost hovering close to his head. "They're not actually robots," Anna grumbles. "Nonetheless, hazard like that costs extra." Moss II's eyes blink independently, followed by his ghost's iris, as if in sequence. Anna looks to Earp quizzically, who shrugs, then back to Moss II. "What is this, a shakedown?" A grizzled human titan at the table, Cogburn, stands. His mountainous frame towers over the seated guardians. Moss once claims to weapons, loot, or patterns we find. Boy's still fresh, grave dirt on his boots. "Needs all the help he can get," he booms, then turns to his partners. "Why are we muddying this water? Dancing around? Just ask her for it." Anna laughs, leans back to meet Cogburn's gaze, then stares down Moss II. "I'm going to assume you shot that offer so high because you're hoping to get something in the middle. Here it goes. You get your normal payment, plus first print of any weapon schematics we find that Tex can fabricate. They'll fit those custom threads." "Sound good to you, Moss?" Cogburn barks with a gruff chuckle, sitting. "If things get too hot, your ghost can just do it for you." Neek arrives, distributes drinks, and sits as Anna pulls a free chair next to her. Anna studies Moss II and his ghost as they silently consider her offer. A cranial implant embedded in Moss II's skull flashes a light in sequence with the ghost's iris. "What do you mean by that?" "I don't have a firm grasp on the light." Moss II's illuminated mouth forms a frown. "But No Name does. So we share." The ghost settles into his open palm. "Share what?" Moss II taps the blinking implant on his cranial plate. "Everything. And we find your offer acceptable." The party shares agreeing glances, then return a simple, silent nod before draining their cups. So Moss II has immediately become an interesting case study into the lengths that some Exo Guardians can go to when considering the nature of their versatility. To share a neural link with one's ghost is probably something that tells us as much about ghosts as it does about Guardians, and as much about Exos as it does too. For one, it means that they're both truly mechanical in nature, and whilst we've always known that about ghosts, there is a degree to which we don't truly understand them, and to which they're sort of intangible, raised above a simple drone. They're not quite the same as an AI like Failsafe or anything like that. The fact that they're connected to the light kind of does that for them. It's something that, again, it elevates them. As for the Exo side of things with Moss 2, it's got a lot of weird weight to it as far as the lore is concerned. It's always been an assumption that Exos have to conform to what their original human mind needs psychologically and physiologically in order to survive. This is done to prevent the onset of DER, or dissociative exomind rejection, where the human mind identifies that it's not in a human body and essentially breaks down because of it. Moss is perhaps showing us that Guardians who die regularly on the battlefield can perhaps skirt all of that, or that for Guardians, DER isn't something that takes place overall. And the reason being is because, well, sharing your mind like that is most definitely a way to psych out your psychology and make it very clear that no, you're not a human anymore. Keep in mind again, when we mention the "you're not a human" bit, it's not as though every Exo ever walked around and thought that they were a human being with skin and bones as opposed to metal and wires. This is not quite what I mean. This is all about the internal recognition of whether you are human or not. The body and mind are different from a standard human one, and your very inner mind, not your consciousness but your subconsciousness, needs to know that the body is truly yours. This is how DER takes place. But again, maybe for Guardians it's not necessary. Remember that in the journals of Clovis Bray and throughout all of the experimental logs that you can get from Europa, we see all sorts of horrific tests on Exos that Clovis Bray conducted. He once gave an Exo an extra set of arms, and it literally panicked so much and immediately had a breakdown to the point where it tried to rip those arms off and killed itself. I'm not kidding when I say that someone putting a chip to their brain and then having it shared with another conscious being is not normal for an Exo. That's something that perhaps is only possible because Moss 2 is a Guardian, and it tells us a lot about DER. Either way, regardless of whether this is something that can be explained away because DER doesn't affect Guardian Exos or not, it's a fascinating case study because, again, you have two individuals, both connected to the light, that have a degree of comfort and familiarity with each other that allows them to share that connection and to share minds. It's something that is also hinted to by Cogburn that they can even switch control of their bodies, or at least have one mind take over control of that body. Regardless of the strange interaction that our Guardians first have, it's nothing compared to the stuff we see out of Moss 2's Ghost. The Ghost is called No Name. Literally, No Name. And there are some amazing things that No Name is able to pull off in the field at Moss's request. The mission that Anna has proposed to Moss, Earp, and Cogburn leads them back to the Ares Spire, and it's here that they discover that they are still dealing with Sol Divisive Vex remnants that are left within the Spire's databanks. These are Vex that have been left behind, and ultimately it's decided that they should blow the Spire's EMPs in order to leave no more Vex standing either in the computer systems or physically on the ground. However, when they start the 5-minute countdown for the EMPs, the Vex Collective is alerted and the Sol Divisive begins to advance. A heated battle ensues where we can see the mysterious link between Moss and his ghost start to take its most remarkable form. We see No Name, Moss's ghost, using a super when Moss calls out for him in a moment of struggle. Yes, you heard that correctly. A ghost took over a Guardian's body and used its superior connection to the light to cast a super. Take a listen. Earp is the first to see the Sol Divisive materializing. Hobgoblins marked. The Sol Divisive belong to the Witness, I hear. Earp draws and sends shots singing from his Vulpecula through hobgoblins until expending his cylinder. He takes to the edge of the deck, reloads mid-dodge over a searing line rifle beam, and flicks a skip grenade into their ranks. More snipers marked. I wonder if their radial area is different from the main collective. Jolting arc breaks the hobgoblin formation. The remaining Vex pivot their attention to him. Arc amplification surges through Earp, shortening the span between him and his enemies. He hits their formation like a bolt jumping through open receivers, weaving chains of electricity through the outer ring of the deck, dancing between Sol Divisive frames with knife, cannon, and striking bolt. Cogburn is about to die. Earp covers the distance to Cogburn's attacker in a flash. He slides, rolls between the Minotaur's legs, and delivers a thunderous counterblow uppercut that leaves the Vex blind open. The Hunter levels his cannon with his target's vulnerable Radiolarian globe and fires, leaving a frigid headstone in its place, which Cogburn pulverizes into shards with a backhand. You have contact, straight ahead. Cogburn lunges forward as enemies swarm the deck, shattering goblin after goblin with behemoth fists like stasis-encrusted pistons. He looks over his shoulder to Anna and Moss II, clipping targets out of the sky. Earp drawing a circuit through the Vex at his flanks. Minotaurs phasing on your left. 3 newly materialized Minotaurs open fire. Cogburn is already in motion and slides under the blasts on stasis sleet before hurling a glacial grenade to cover his advance. Stasis crystals encase the closest Minotaur, and Cogburn crashes through it with shattering force, destroying them all. Damn fine work. That's why I raised you. You're the closest I could get to a Cabal. Gunfire, incoming, right. Cogburn draws his barricade through a dark sieve. A wall of stasis erupts to his right against the barrage. He dashes through it and into the Vex attackers, wrapped in hoarfrost mimicry and destruction. His fists rain on the Sol Divisive, an avalanche to bury them under the darkness they claim to serve. Cogburn stands in a heap of twisted frames, Radiolarian pools freeze solid at the lips of his boots. A shot flies over his shoulder, downing a harpy. He tracks it to Anna at the southern deck edge. Anna skewers a 5th harpy, causing it to combust in a solar blast that scatters the Vex descending on the southern deck. She hears Moss's gun running low when a Cyclops phases into being below the deck. Anna flings a gunpowder bomb high into the air and sparks it with a shot from her rifle, demolishing a dozen Vex with a booming explosion to open a firing window on the Cyclops. Anna, they're targeting the support structures. As more Cyclopses phase in around her, Anna slings Polaris Lance and thrusts her empty gun hand forward. Solar flame ignites in her palm, forged into a golden gun. The heat of her shots leaves a molten trench and pools of simmering light that drip over the observation deck. Her golden rounds combust the air and sear holes through the eye of each Cyclops aiming to topple the spire from beneath the fire team. How long, Jinju? Under a minute. Get ready. I'm starting my run. Moss II braces his left arm and opens the barrel of his LMG to unleash a deluge of void into the darkening sky. Harpies take evasive action, but many succumb to the hail of heavy munitions before they can align firing solutions on the Warlock. No name. From Moss II's right hand, an empowering rift flows, coaxing a child of the old gods from non-existence into the descending Vex, detonating built-up volatility into a chain of violent consumption. Moss II/No Name takes cover to reload, and the Vex rain laser fire upon them. A host of Minotaurs push his position. No Name. His right eye juts to the advancing Minotaurs. His right hand snaps towards them, palm open, and discharges a handheld supernova that deletes all but one Minotaur. It phases to his backside. Moss II drops his machine gun to draw a sidearm, but the Minotaur is too fast and drives a metallic arm through the Warlock's gut, pinning him to the deck. Moss gasps. "Take over, now!" No Name. Moss II's body shutters, his eyes sink. Then he unleashes a shockwave of Nova Warp erasure, detonating the shield of the Minotaur, pinning him, and devouring it entirely to stitch his wound. The warlock rises like a marionette, floating in a violet singularity. No name. Jinju is nearing the deck. Moss 2 will cover the retreat. Moss 2 speaks as light stitches their wound, eyes moving independently of each other, his voice layered with another, unfamiliar, and frying with interference. Jinju brings the jump ship down through a screen of laser fire, braking speed just long enough to stabilize near the observation deck. Anna leaps aboard and lays down covering fire for Cogburn to slide in and shield the ship from harm with glacial walls. Earp boards with a flourish, hurling an arc staff into the sky to stick a harpy like a lightning rod and clear the air for takeoff. Moss 2 is the last to board, void volatility flittering off his body as Jinju punches the engines. The fireteam blasts off toward the safety of the sun, followed by a wave of electrical distortion that leaves the complex dark and littered with fried, soul-divisive frames. So an interesting note that you can make about that lore reading is you can see who is really taking all of these actions with Moss 2's body by, well, the name that's written before it. In some instances, it's Moss, in other instances, it's No Name, and in a few instances, it's both of them. At the very end there, in a moment of desperation, Moss calls out to No Name and directly commands him to take over. From there, something utterly unheard of happens. A ghost uses a super from within the body of the Guardian. Moss's eyes start moving independently of each other, his body becomes one that's controlled by his ghost, but he enters a Nova Warp and utterly destroys the Minotaur that has him pinned. And he is not doing it himself, he's asking No Name to do it. The entire thing opens us up to a whole range of conversations, but I think I'd like to think a little bit more about the duality in the situation that's on display. Not the duality between the Guardian and their ghost, but between our own minds and bodies. This is a concept that is happening here in Destiny, but it certainly isn't unique to Destiny. Religions of any different kind have discussed the nature of one's soul and body going back thousands of years, be its interpretation in something such as samsara, or as dualism, where the body and soul are bound together until death passes one's soul onto afterlife. Regardless, this interaction between Moss and No Name tells us something about that separation between the two of them and between the potential body and soul of a Guardian and their ghosts. Looking at a passage like this, I think the biggest question is whether this is a quirk of No Name and Moss being mechanical, but if you put that aside, I think it becomes possible to put forward a very simple idea. If Moss allows his body to be taken over by No Name and No Name is activating a super, then can we see also how the light functions a little bit better? So let's break that down for a moment. Moss is the Guardian and his body is the one that gets resurrected, and it apparently is the thing that casts the super. No Name is the ghost and can resurrect Moss's body, but can't do those things from within the ghost chassis that they reside in. Moss supposedly doesn't have a strong connection to the light, but his ghost No Name does, so they share through that neural link. Moss's body appears to be capable of casting a super, but it can't be cast by Moss himself, it needs to be cast by No Name for that to happen. So, what can we tell from this? Maybe it's the fact that the connection to the light is something that can ultimately be used through one's body a little bit like a conduit. We can also see from the lore in-game and from practical experience that everybody is a different kind of Guardian, and I think it's fair to say that every ghost is a different kind of ghost as well. We all prefer certain elements or parts of the light compared to others. Some of us master all of the light's elements and even elements of the darkness. Some are proficient only with one, some of us just have a favorite, and we also know that the connection to the light is something that can grow with time and patience, as is one's mastery of other subclasses, skills, etc. We also know that our ghosts act as conduits from us to the Traveler's light, and that without them, the supers we cast wouldn't be possible. I think what it all shows us is that an individual soul can be worthy of the light and its powers, but their capabilities are varied across whoever they may be, and according to who they are, and the role that they fill, as well as any strengths that they have, and the strength of their connection to the light itself. Perhaps we need to take all of this as a way of saying that as long as a connection of an appropriate nature is forged, it's possible for any one being to make use of the light as any conduit of it allows them to. So, in other words, if you allowed your own ghost to possess your body and it had a stronger connection to the light than you did, maybe it would be a better guardian than you would. It's hard to think of an appropriate analogy for how that functions, but I think it's best to think of an individual's mind, or perhaps soul, as different from their body, and to see the two in combination as capable of different things. Imagine perhaps that the ghost is merely swapping out its spirit momentarily for that of the guardian, thus allowing its connection in the light to be used more aggressively within the guardian's body for a short span of time. No matter how we look at it, this means we need to fundamentally rethink the relationship that we have with our ghosts. Moss 2 and No Name have shown us that the relationship that ghosts, their guardians, and the light all have together in completeness is something totally other than what we first supposed it to be. Don't forget their names. We definitely need to be watching these two for future stories that might turn up as time goes on. They are bound to have more to teach us about the light, and they are bound to present us with some interesting stories. And even if none of this does interest you, you're probably going to get a few more Western cowboy stories out of it. So how can you really complain? But that's all from me for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I think that this is one of the most fascinating topics I've got to cover this whole season, and I'm really excited to share it with you. If you liked it, again, go ahead and leave a like on the video, and if you have any thoughts of your own, leave them down below in the comments section. What do you think this tells us about the relationship between the light, the ghosts, and the guardians? I genuinely don't know what to make of this without seeing more of it in action, so I just hope we get more lore like this. And of course, if you want more Destiny content, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.